Hey everyone, welcome to episode 72 of the Sarah's podcast. As many of you know, I decided to take a little sabbatical from podcasting. It's only been about 8 weeks since we last recorded an episode, but for the most part, when we were told to lock down at the end of March, I think many of us went through a weird sort of the stages of grief, essentially. I know I did. But when the government support kicked in, I felt a huge weight lifted, as did many others. During this time, many fish and chip shops closed, and several fish and chip wholesalers closed too, and that left pretty much a lot of us with nothing to do. So I would say it was pretty boring, but it wasn't, because there was a huge network of people sort of just chatting to each other and helping each other get through it. Also, the other thing for me was that I had a lot of jobs and projects that were sort of bubbling away pre-COVID, and I suddenly found the focus and the time to actually get them done, especially when I knew the business that I spent years creating was safe, essentially. Pre-COVID, I think we had around 80 articles on our website, and as of today, we have just shy of 350 articles. No joke, that's a pretty steep writing curve, but I've had lots of help. You can read up on case studies, recipes, how-to guides, and so much more. One of the main reasons that we sort of stopped podcasting was to really focus on writing, and we thought that that was a better medium throughout all of this craziness because everyone's routines had just sort of fell apart. So we thought written articles would be the way to go as opposed to audio. But now we're sort of going to do both side by side and lots of other things as well. Now, many of you will know that we've also been working on new products. And off the bat, I'd like to say thank you to Cihan, who's on this episode, for all of his help pre-sort of manufacture with the Sarah's Deep Fryer Cleaner and Restorer. I know that's a bit of a mouthful, but hey, it does what it says on the tin. Cihan really helped us in the planning phase of this project, and Jem and many others actually helped us test it on their range before launch. So thank you to everyone for helping us create this great product. For those of you that haven't heard about the Sarah's Deep Fryer Cleaner and Restorer, I think I'll get used to it, then you can learn more about it on our website and even purchase yours from our online shop, worldofsarahs.com/shop. Now, on to the episode, people. In this instalment, we talked to Jem and his brother Cihan from the Packet Bridge Fish and Chips in Bolton Le Sands and Westgate Fish and Chips in Morecambe. It was only a year ago that we had a chat with Jem, but we thought it'd be good to have a nice little catch-up with both brothers. Just one more note about social media before we get on with this episode. We've consolidated our social media accounts as there was just too many. We've gone from 9 to 4 accounts. And it was just, everyone was getting a bit confused. There was just so much to handle. So now you will find all of our social media updates all under one roof at Sarah's PFI on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. All the other accounts have been closed, so this is where it's at. And I think for the most part, anyone who was friends with Sarah's podcast was friends with Sarah's PFI. Now, on to the episode. I hope you enjoy it with Jem and Cihan. Jem, Cihan, welcome to the Sarah's podcast.
Hello there, Stelios.
Hey, mate.
I ain't said that in ages, you know. It feels like absolutely ages since I've done a podcast. 8 weeks or so, give or take?
It's been a while.
Have you missed it?
No. I'm joking. Of course I have. Listened to my own one last night.
Is that not vain, Cihan?
Well, he probably listens to it every week.
It's
got
an
it on
early
in
claim
his
to
car.
fame, isn't it?
Yeah.
He's probably got me deleted off the tracks.
That's it.
So, for those that don't know you, you're Jem and Cihan, both brothers, owners, partners, boss, not so boss, whatever, of Westgate and Packet Bridge. You know, we thought we'd pick up the podcasting again after a brief sabbatical. And with everything going on, I just don't see why we should be doing podcasting when everybody was worried about losing their business. I don't know if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, and, we went through that as well. So, we all did. We were all texting each other through it, weren't we?
That's right, yeah.
So it was almost like that the beginning of COVID, let's say, which was what, end of March?
End of March,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when it got serious.
Pretty intense,
UK,
wasn't it?
yeah.
They're not knowing, and we're all texting each other all the time, and evaluating other things, and just trying to figure out what was best for our business. And so I thought at that point in time, we still did a few podcasts, but after that, I just lost the appetite for it because the conversation was the same. Like, there's only so much you can hear about I might go bust or just negativity. And it wasn't people's fault as guests. It was just, what else was there to talk about?
It was uncertain times, wasn't it, at the time? So
it just became the forefront of everybody's conversation, didn't it?
Yeah. And that was the uncertain times has probably become the two words of the year, hasn't it, really? I think, and the new normal.
Well, yeah. I like to say it's a steady state of uncertainty.
Well, you do get used to the chaos, though. Like, who would have thought this year would have been like that? Of course, you did notice that I figured this out, of course. What did you say? 23 what?
23 minutes into my podcast, yeah.
What did I say? Come
Still
on, tell everyone.
COVID. Something along the lines of, we're coming up to uncertain times, and you need to invest in the future in uncertain times.
Like I said earlier, Nostradamus.
There you go, yeah.
Although, joking aside, I think I wasn't about Brexit.
Probably, yeah.
Who'd have thought that Brexit would have been like at the back of our minds?
Everyone's forgot about it at the moment, haven't they?
I think it's a welcome distraction, to be honest. I was getting quite tired of talking about that as well.
Yeah, I think once COVID's out of the way,
Brexit's going to be back,
Brexit's back. Like, you can see the news stories, how Brexit's back. Like, something else for us all to be sick and argue
We're
about.
working on a vaccine for Brexit.
God, for Brexit. That's probably a good one, to be fair. No, I think there is a lot of news fatigue in general. I think it's just like, I sort of like, I choose the news I read anyway, and even then it's repetitive. It's quite,
And negative.
Again, like, I suppose there's not a lot positive to talk about.
No.
Some would argue Trump getting COVID was positive. That was awful, actually. Joking aside, I was on Twitter, and the amount of people that were cheering about it was just odd. Yeah.
It's a bit inhumane, isn't it?
So, as you know, we've been putting out lots of written content, and I sort of probably think everyone should probably, go through it if they want, have a little read. But I think you guys have been a massive help to me over this period, because I think maybe I didn't show it, but it's nice to have that network of people to chat to. Like, I know most of it was memes and jokes, but
no, I certainly enjoyed it. I mean, I was stuck in at work, as you know, I was overseas, and it was like I say, quite a welcome distraction from my day to day. So I was quite happy to talk about alternative subjects.
I've got to admit, I kept you guys fed with lots of alternative subjects. Like, I'm like the king of memes, you know that. Like,
big fan of Barry Wood, aren't you?
You had to say it.
You had to say it. Yeah. I have a reputation to keep, I love you now. There's always one that lowers the tone, isn't there, Cihan? Always. I think more than anything, after we did a podcast with you a year ago, Jem, I just wanted to sort of have you both on and also talk about sort of, how Cihan decided, I want to get into the fish and chip business. Like, so give us a little bit of background information on what you do day to day, because you're not in the fish and chip business. You sort of manage from afar. So give us a little brief introduction to what you do, Cihan.
Yeah, okay. So I'm sort of qualified as a quantity surveyor. At the moment, I'm a supply chain manager for an oil and gas business in Iraq, northern Iraq. It's actually in Kurdistan. So I've been doing that. I've done that for about 15 years, worked overseas for at least 10 of those. And, one of the things that, if we go back to the beginning, when I bought Packet Bridge, at that time I didn't know I wanted a fish and chip shop. It's never really been a dream of mine. It was never really something that was even on my radar. However, I'd always been quite entrepreneurial, I'd say, and I was always looking for that other opportunity to bring in a second income. I was working in the UK at the time, earning a reasonable salary as a QS, but I just wanted something on the side. I wanted some additional income, and property was the way that I wanted to do that. I'd made a little bit of money on a property that I'd been renovating, and had been speaking to my dad about the shop, which was the Packet Bridge. It was for sale at the time, and it was John Wilde that owned it at the time, who was a family friend, going back many years ago when he was a driving instructor and taught both my mum and dad to drive. And so we got talking about that. My dad had been round there told me it was a great little shop, and I should have a look at it. And I'd spoken to my dad then about maybe, I'd taken it on as a business that he would run as an alternative to what he was doing at the time, which was very late nights, plenty of fights in Lancaster. God. So he wasn't getting any younger. We thought it was possibly a good thing that we would solve two problems really. So we moved on from there. We bought I bought the Packet Bridge. My dad was running it from the beginning, and things sort of moved on from there as things sort of work themselves out. Sometimes they don't work out, and Dad moved on, went back to the kebab shop, and Jem was working there at the time, so that's when Jem stepped up and started managing the Packet Bridge. For me, it was never for me to have a second job. It wasn't never my intention to buy myself a job. I bought it for the income and for the business. I wanted somebody to manage it. It was always going to be the way. I was never going to be an owner-operator. So, Jem stepped up, stepped in, let's say.
In your mind, what would have happened if Jem didn't?
I'd have got on with it somehow. Mm-hmm. I'd have found a way. There's 10,000 shops in the UK. Yeah. There's people around that can do it. They may never have done it to the standard I'm expecting, or it's one of those. Until I'm in the situation, I'm not really sure how I may have dealt with it. But I've dealt with difficult situations quite a lot. You're working on construction sites and you lose your site manager. That you just cope with it and get
to the shops in Kurdistan's pretty ropey, to be honest.
yeah, it's actually a pretty nice place.
It wasn't only last week he sent us a photo like blood all over the floor on the streets or something.
Yeah,
someone got butchering a lamb in the garden.
It was actually a full cow, but on the driveway.
Yeah, but a side gig.
Yeah, I mean that's normal. That's the new normal. So anyway, Jem did step up at that point, and then from that point forward, I was heavily involved in sort of the direction that I wanted to take the business, what quality I was expecting, and I was more in touch with the shop than I am today. I've sort of taken a bit more of a step back and managed the business from afar, because I've obviously got plenty of work on as it is.
So and we're not sort of pointing at Jem here, but has there ever been a time when you thought, why did I bother? Because it is a pretty hand. Do you know what I mean? Like Absolutely. It is a hands-on business.
No, there's a couple of times when he.
I've had him up against the wall a few times. Let's be honest. No, we've had fallouts, serious fallouts. We've had big raging arguments. It happens. That's families in business.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not a bad thing that you can actually get things off your chest in that way, and you don't have to keep your professional head on.
Yeah.
Because it can be utterly frustrating. But we've worked them out. We've got, in the last couple of years at least, we've managed to get over that. I don't think I've had
I'd say a bit longer than a couple of years, but yeah.
It's probably 4 the last time I heard you.
Yeah, you sort of half the time was probably a bit battling, trying to figure each other out a bit, and the other half has just been, I know what he's like and I know what to expect of each other maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I've got high expectations anyway, so that's possibly where a lot of the issues were. I mean, I want him to be the best he can be as well, so I'm always pushing him. Wherever I see any sort of slippage or downfall. I mean, I said that it was his birthday recently.
It wasn't my birthday. Yeah, it was annual performance review, not my birthday apparently.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, I mean, I like to push him, and I think he's responding well to that these days.
I suppose you have been a bit more than Jem, because Jem's probably more at the coalface. So you can be a bit more inquisitive, whereas he can't, because he needs to make sure that there is a steady ship where the shop is involved. And I think that's probably where the difference is to some degree. Although you're open-minded, Jem, you can't be open-minded when you're in the middle of a shift.
Yeah.
Whereas you're probably a bit more long-termist.
I'm definitely more strategic, and I like to take a look at things from a distance and say, this isn't heading the right way.
There isn't much of a choice though.
No, exactly. Correct. Yeah.
I think that's why it works well though, because we both are different, and we're both not like hands on in the shop all day every day, and So Cihan's obviously not got his head buried in the sand a little bit like I have, and he can sort of stand back and...
I think the expression's in the woods.
Yeah.
Forest for the trees, not head in the sand.
Do you know what I mean? All sort of like hands-on every day, so he can stand back and analyse and, like you say, put together a strategy for various different things, as we've obviously learnt with COVID.
Well, because I think we touched on it in your podcast, but in about 2011 is when I sort of met you. Well, we met by text or email or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And, you were always on Chippy Chat back in those days.
Yeah.
When it was before pre-magazine, let's say.
Yes.
And what are they called? Message boards, isn't it?
It was a forum.
Yeah. I remember like there you were very inquisitive always, like looking for answers, and I think you never, even looking back, you never accepted old wives' tales. Well, we've always done it like this.
Yeah.
You wanted to know why.
Yeah.
And I think that always stays in my mind that you were just never happy with. Well, we've always done it like this.
Yeah, I mean, if things were just good, we'd never progress. And that goes for absolutely everything. And for me, I always look to improve. I always look for alternatives, better ways of working, efficiencies, or better products that give me a better product. At the end of the day, we're trying to be better than the rest. And so by constantly searching, understanding why, understanding the strategic reasons behind it, it helps you understand which way you need to go, or whether there's even any point going down that avenue. You got to focus your energies as well and pick your battles.
It's really weird. Like, you say that because I think even today in our industry, in some ways we haven't moved forward. Like we wrote an article recently, and one of the topics was it was all about efficiencies and how to create efficiencies in your business. Yeah. And I'm fascinated by McDonald's because McDonald's, if they can save 2 seconds on a process and there's no negative effect, it's only a positive effect, and they will implement it, and that will be millions of saving because or millions more turnover because they can serve more customers, let's say. And yet we wrote an article about efficiencies, and someone texts me and goes, "Oh, what a load of crap! It's stupid." And he goes, "I just don't see why would you want to serve a customer 1 minute faster?"
Yeah. To be fair, we've looked at things like that, haven't we? The way we operate our business and stuff. It's like little things in regards to doing the potatoes and stuff like that. That's made us a lot more efficient by buying in pre-prepared and stuff like that. There's different ways of analysing your business and making things a lot more streamlined and efficient.
With Westgate, we were given the opportunity to start with a blank canvas, and so the primary objective of that was to build in efficiency. So you're looking at the flow and making sure that the whole way of working was there was no clashes. Yeah. It could you could step up if needed to, and that everything was in a place that made sense. I tried to do that as much as possible with Packet Bridge in the beginning. So in 2009, 10, 11 on Chippy Chat, that's what I was always searching for. I was always seeing, what's the easier way of doing this? Is there a better way of doing this? Portion control was a conversation that was discussed quite a lot back then. One of the easiest ways to do it is having a rigid box, and so that was a simple way of me making sure that even though I'm in Kazakhstan, which is where I was at the time, I knew that the portions weren't going out, overflowing. And it's just things like that, making sure that you're introducing things that are going to improve. Almost do it organically. So it's not something that you just need to keep ramming home. It actually happens because there's no other way for them to do it. So we've got it set up now in the Packet Bridge. It can't work slowly anymore.
No.
There's nobody in anybody's way. It's got to go out. It's a production line.
But one thing I noticed about Westgate is that every bit of available space has a use. I remember just putting my keys on the side and I felt like I was in the way. I think that's because someone is there chopping something or cutting fish or making curry, let's say. Every bit of space is utilised because it's not a huge shop, but it is used really well. And I think that you've used the space very well.
I think that's what was again the primary focus when I'd started with that. It was a blank canvas. It was a nice shell to start with, and I'd done the property development thing for a couple of years as well. So I look at spaces and I make sure that they are being used to the maximum potential. Yeah. And with Westgate, I literally said, okay, what's this corner going to be used for? Now, can we stack things? Can we do things a different way? And I think you mentioned McDonald's earlier, The Founder. If you've watched that.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it?
It was just great watching that documentary and just showing how he planned it out on a floor and he moved people moved around each other. Yeah. And so when you can visualise that in the space on your plan, you know, we quite quickly, between us, we're saying, well, where's your fridges going to go? Put them over here, that's going to clash with the dishwasher, so we're not doing that, you know.
We chopped and changed the plans a few times, didn't we, I think Simon from KFE will vouch for that, than the amount of times that I flipped the fish pans and chip pans over and stuff like that to make sure it was as efficient as possible. And
yeah, there was a last minute change on that, because I was just like, well, look, we've now invested in a till system that's going to bring up all the fried products on a screen next to the fryer. Well, the important ones there are the fish, and the other the chips aren't important. Get them away from the screen, so we put them the opposite end of the frying range, and it's just meant that that's now a perfect working area.
I must admit, like, I think recently especially, I was looking at some plans. I don't know how they fell into my lap, and there were some McDonald's plans, and the way they arrange their kitchens, it's pretty spectacular, really. Like, everything, you know, is made to drive volume. Not getting into quality, I don't, you know, I can't bother with that. Like, just looking at how they knock out as much food as they can.
Yeah.
And it's not unknown for some McDonald's to do 4 or 5 grand an hour.
Yeah.
And when you look at that volume, the scale, and they do it without hitting any sort of headaches.
Yeah, no staff breaks, sweating the head of this.
Don't get me wrong, there's issues with that company at the same time, but as a huge company, for the most part, they get it right.
Yeah.
And I think, but it did make me think when I saw some of their plans, how, so I was chatting to a friend of mine who owns quite a few McDonald's, and she said that the misconception is that people have is that these new screens, which you guys have now installed one, haven't you? That they remove staff. And she goes, but because the way the screens work and you can order off apps and everything, they need 3 times more staff out the back.
Yeah.
So all the kitchens have been rebuilt to allow for that volume. And if you notice now, it's very rare that you see a single drive-through. Usually it's 3 lanes, 4 lanes. So there's quite a lot. So there's a lot of people that are preparing all this food. And it just made me think, like, do we set up fish and chip shops for that sort of scale?
Yeah.
We still work, for the most part, counter ranges. Yeah. Some people go for an island range, you know. And I was thinking about, like, and again, tell me if I'm wrong here, but, like, imagine if you did have, like, 2 ranges split in the middle, where everything literally cooks and ends up in the middle. Like an island range with a thing in the middle, and everything goes through there, and it goes out the counter at the front, because then you could have chips being cooked to your left, fish on your right, and it's almost like it all meets in the middle.
So I've considered all sorts of stuff like that. I mean, what I try to do, I look at businesses outside of our industry, and I look at how they drive performance and efficiencies. I'm in the oil and gas industry now. It's all about performance and efficiency. And I've looked at where you can have a range set up similar to that. I've looked at it at Packet Bridge even, and I've looked at it where we have the shop that we've got right now, but we've also got the basement area, which is on a lower level, so they've got a road access to the lower level. And I thought about having a range down there, and basically that's a closed area, which is for delivery only. Yeah. So you're serving 2 parts of your business. You're increasing your capacity and your volume. You're not expecting that to go through the one single range. Yeah. And honestly, you know, from that one footprint, you could almost double your turnover. Yeah. I reckon, by doing that.
I don't think the volume, the sort of the throughput volume is the same, but I do like the idea of, like, the modular unit, where you can just slot one in. If you need another one, you get another one. Yeah. If you don't need it because you're quiet, sell it. Yeah. You know, rather than having a fixed range, 4 pans, you know. I think although they drive a lot of volume, which they do, at the same time, if you had modular units, you could be quite flexible as well.
I mean, I touched on it a bit last year with the range that we bought for Westgate, anticipating setting up for a busy shop. I mean, like I said, we got an extra fish pan and stuff in there, didn't we? Just in case we needed it, and it's sort of building up and getting busier now. So. Yeah. We are using it a lot more, and but it's got a lot more capacity to do a hell of a lot more.
So if we look at capacity and ranges for a moment, I see, and this is probably a contentious thing to say, but, you know, I've often said that not everyone should get a Dutch range, and I know this sounds, I love Dutch ranges. So I'm probably pro Dutch. You know, I think most people know that. But not everybody should get one, and I think that if you're not going to be busy enough, or you're not going to have that volume, then I would say don't go buy a 2-pan Dutch, just buy a 3-pan British, because you've got the volume to grow. You know, I do think that, you know, you should only buy Dutch if your base costs cover all the expenses, because they do cost more to run and have, like, because they do throw out more product. So, you know, And I think a lot of people do take issue with the costs of running, if you're doing a new pan and so on. But at the same time, they do throw out a lot more product. So you've got to accept that it comes with the territory, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's pros and cons to everything, and you should select your equipment based on your intentions of your business.
Yeah.
So if you intend to be a very busy shop that requires that amount of food processing and handling, then you go Dutch. Like you say, if it's something like it's a bit of a slower shop but it's steady all day, go for a British.
Yeah.
There's no reason why. There's nothing to say that a Dutch is just outright better. But for us,
well, I think like anything, it's what is the use. It's like buying a Ferrari for van usage. Like you wouldn't do it, would you? So, and I'm not saying one is a Ferrari and one's not. Again, they all have their use case, and I'm saying, what is your use case? I've had a few people ring me recently, and they're like, "Oh, I'm in the market for a 2-pan range." I'm like, "Don't go Dutch." Because don't go anything for a 2-pan range, but if you're outpricing yourself to go get a Dutch range, then you can't afford a 3-pan.
Yeah.
And really, you want 3 pans because if something goes wrong, you're not left with one.
Correct. Yeah.
And it's something. And I know people want to buy a range like that. I get it completely. Yeah. But at the same time, if it's out of your budget, you don't need to. And I just think that I can see why people get frustrated by that. But again, equipment is a really important thing. Like I see it on the group sometimes. Who's got a used fish fridge? Who's got a used fish fridge? And then it's like, my fish fridge broke. But you're like, well, you bought a used one. There's no warranty. There's no nothing.
I'd always advise buy new. I'd always advise lease because there's tax benefits to that, and it makes sense to do so from a cash flow perspective. You pay a little bit of interest on a lease. It doesn't really matter. It falls, it's insignificant in the end. But having new equipment with 3 or 5 year warranties that gives you the peace of mind for that period. That's worth a lot to me, especially when I work away. I want to make sure that I've got equipment that's not going to fail me. So we in oil and gas we measure things by availability and reliability. I don't think we're there yet with our range manufacturers and things like that, but they're certainly metrics that I'd like them to consider. I think I mentioned it I think it might have been Simon, but I'm not sure. But like a condition monitoring, where you actually, your ranges get more smart, and they're able to monitor the performance of your equipment. They can log in from remotely, and they can see how your equipment's performing. If burners are starting to misfire.
Yeah, I think we discussed that last time you were here. Didn't we?
And I just think it's a great idea.
I remember getting that idea from how old are you, Cihan?
36.
So same age.
Yeah.
So
we can tell.
Same age. Yeah. He always says I'm old. That
starts with a 3.
Honestly, back in my day. So if you remember, when we were at school, the original McLaren F1 came out.
Yes.
If you remember, and I was obsessed with it because they said when it was in the garage, you'd plug it in to the phone line, and it would then tell McLaren what was up with it. And I was saying, and I've told all the range manufacturers this. Why haven't we adopted this today in the world of Wi-Fi? That you've got something in the range that's constantly just every night sending a report. Or even if there's a problem
when it flags something up and stuff,
rather than and then it's prevention, not cure.
You also get readings such as worked hours. So for a quiet shop that only opens 20 hours a week, the range might be operating 25 of those with the warm up and cool down. So you've got a shop there that's got the same range. You can't measure things by annual service and for a year. You might have a shop that's absolutely hammering it, doing 80 hours a week, and that needs a service more.
Every 6 months or something instead.
It'd be like selling a tractor.
Yeah.
It gets sold with hours.
Yes.
It's done X amount of hours.
Yeah.
Another thing, for example, if a pan goes, and it does, and it will go on any range, British or Dutch, I don't care what anybody says, it's going to go. The only argument is one costs more than the other. If, for example, there's a pan failure, and then they can look at it and say, okay, well, we can see that it's worked 40 hours a week for the last 6 years, and they've dropped it 15 times in the last year at 185. Yeah, if they had that data, they could turn around and say, and that reminds me of one of the Ferraris a few years ago. They were saying a guy took it in because his clutch went, which isn't strange for a Ferrari. No. But they said, oh, you've been
riding it.
And he's like, oh no, I ain't. And they printed off a little manifest that says he did it on all these days. And I'm
like a black box on a car.
Yeah, exactly. But why couldn't you have a black box on a range? I just think we've got to be getting there, surely.
Well, the signals are there already because it's displaying a readout. So there's no reason why there couldn't be a small little computer in there that's data logging. Basically, your range engineer can come along, can plug in with a USB or whatever it is, or they can have a remote link, and they could get that information, and they could say, even to new shop owners or new customers and clients, they can look at this and say, this performance data is not right, there's something not right here. Look into it and go, guys, just to let you know, I know you've only had the range 4 weeks, but you're dropping this oil too soon, or you're doing this and it's
lots
not
of little helpful prompts.
Correct, yeah. I mean, we get that with our compressors and turbines. You know.
Or even, we're noticing that there's a major fault.
Yeah.
So we're sending the engineer, he's on his way. Right? Or she, sorry, because it could be he or she's on their way, they're going to come and sort it out right away before it becomes an issue.
Yes.
And then you then hopefully, and I think, let's face it, when breakages happen, it's always on a Friday. It's never on a Monday, is it? Let's face it. So if it means that you can save a day's downtime because Karemco, Florigo, Hopkins, whoever turned up on the day that there was a problem and said, look, we've just noticed some irregularities, can we just give it a once over, please? I don't think many shop owners would be peed off about that.
Absolutely not.
I just can't see it.
From a range manufacturer's perspective, though, if they're solving problems, they're losing sales.
Oh no,
that's the opposite.
I think they're gaining sales because, in my view, at the end of that, let's say 7, 8 year, 9 year, 10 year term, and let's hope you get another couple of years out of it because there was prevention, not cure. Then you'd think, oh, you know what? I'm on the market for a new range. Why would I look at something else if the service I had was preemptive and excellent? I don't know, that's my thought process.
I would choose a product based on its service more than the product itself sometimes, because if you've got outstanding after sales service and care, that's the 9-10 years you're going to use this range. It's not the day you buy it. So it might look great. They might go through all the sales spiel and show you all these beautiful ranges and tell you about all the fantastic features you've got. But if you don't get the after sales support on it,
that's why we went the way we went, wasn't it, with our range?
Yeah, but I just think there's an opportunity there for range manufacturers to improve. If one of them took this idea on, I'm certain...
Well, everyone else would follow, hopefully.
Well, everyone else would follow, so it's only improving the overall performance of the industry anyway. But that's why all car manufacturers, we use the Ferrari, they're constantly doing R&D. It's not so they sell less parts later on, because that's not their business model. It's to get... The next range is even better than the last one. Yeah. And so you're always one step ahead of your competition.
I think there's always one thing that stresses me out a little bit. And people, they've learnt the term and they keep regurgitating it on the fish and chip groups, and it's planned obsolescence. It's all we hear every now and then. Oh, yeah, they make them so they break. And I just don't think that's true. I just don't think that's true. I think if the likes of these range manufacturers, oven makers or whatever, just made things so they broke, well, they'd have no customers left, would they? And someone else would actually choose to make something that didn't break. Yeah. So I just think that if there was something that said, like an alert, you've just dropped this pan, it's too hot, don't do it again. Or warning, or just don't let it happen either. That's the other thing. Yep. Like, why is it that it lets it happen with all the technology we've got today? Why is it that there's not like a thermometer or a probe on the underside of the gas chamber that says, you can't drop this oil until it's dropped by 100 degrees, or because it's not the temperature of the oil that's the problem, it's the temperature of the metal. So
that's right.
Why is there nothing there that actually says you can't open the valve until we've lost that residual heat? Yeah. And I think, again, it's, I often say, like, for example, the country's quick to give out speed tickets, yeah? Why don't they put sensors that stop cars from doing above 80, yeah?
That'd be no fun.
No one would buy a car.
Yeah. No, but I get that.
I know
but
what you're saying. In specific areas, I mean, there's 20 mile an hour zones around us, school zones. If it automatically cut in there, those safety critical areas.
Do what you want, you can't go past 20, because it's a school area. Yeah. And then you're going to have to get a fine. But I think the problem is, everyone likes the penalty more than the stick, not the carrot.
Yeah, it feels like their freedom's not been taken away if there's a penalty on it.
Yeah, but I think, like, if the range just wouldn't let you, or at least it prompted you, the metal of the pan is still too hot. do you really want to drop it right now? Again, it might be that you need to do it right now. Something's happened. I don't know. Yeah. You've dropped a load of something in the pan that needs cleaning ASAP.
It'd be great from a management perspective as well, because obviously we've got 2 sites now, so I can't be in both places at any time. And obviously with Cihan working overseas, it would be good for us to be able to monitor how the ranges are being looked after by the staff, and like you say, when oil's being dropped and stuff like that, just to make sure that our equipment is being looked after and stuff.
It's pretty amazing that in our industry, like, we have to sell the concept of checking, of making sure equipment's okay. And you opened my eyes to this when I was at your shop last time you were here, and you said to him, to Jim, have you blowed out the fans yet? On the Fosters, on the fridges?
Yeah.
He was like, oh, I don't know. Like, and you just got under there with the ladder and just did it.
Yeah.
And you think, like, how often do people pull out the fridges and just give them a wipe down or a blow with some air or something?
Yeah.
Like, and I think that, and it's not to disparage people and say they don't do it, but there is a million jobs in a chip shop, like a million jobs, and I know that you know, most of the time they're short staffed as well. Like, and so I can see how jobs fall behind, you know. But I think one thing that's impressed me a little bit is the amount of people that have bought our pan cleaner and genuinely getting their heads in the pan, not when it's on, afterwards, and just checking it. And they're like, they send me photos and they're like, what do you think of this? Is that okay? And I'm like, I think that's okay, but send it to your range manufacturer just in case. And
the great thing about it is they can actually see the defects now.
Yeah, well, that's the point. And I think one argument before was, I don't want to wash my pans because I don't want to see if there's any defects. And I was like, well, that's a bit like Schrodinger's cat. You don't know it's in the box, like, you know. And I think, like, you want to know if there's damage. And that's the way I sold this product. Well, not sold it, but, you know, metaphorically sold it to the range manufacturers. And they agreed with me. They'd want to know if there was defects. They'd want to know. And one chap messaged me recently and he goes, I'm really excited. I'm going to do my pans. And I was like, okay, great. He sends me a photo. And I was like, I zoomed in and I could see the whole left side of the photo was pitted, massively pitted. And I just said, if you rub that area, does it feel like really knobbly and everything? He goes, yeah, because it's just loads of carbon. I was like, it's not carbon. And he goes, you reckon? I was like, so I said, tomorrow when you do it again, take a photo and send it me. And he sent me the whole pan this time. All just like completely, what was it again?
Pitted,
I forgot the word. And so I said to him, look, really, you need to ring up your range manufacturer. I said, because your oils won't be lasting. And he goes, is that why they keep going off? You know, and you don't realise that the amount of impurities that's coming out that metal, you would.
Yeah.
But for the most part, most people just don't realise how much crap is coming out of that metal, ruining the product, ruining the food. And this chap's using dripping, couldn't understand why his dripping was going off so fast. And you think, you know, and he goes, whatever oil I get, it just breaks down. And he genuinely thought it was the range. And then it sort of turns out that all 5 pans are like that. And I just said to him, that's 5, 10, 15, 20. Yeah. That's a lot of money, 5 pans. I just said to him, and the range is like 12, maybe 14 years old.
New range.
Like, you know, and he's like, but it's a lot of money. And I was like, well, now you've got to calculate, like, how much it costs to keep this range going, because the product's not going to be that great. Your oils are going to be going in the bin. So it's interesting. I do think that as an industry, we could spend more time looking at those things, because I think sometimes people are quick to say, my chips aren't good, my batter's not good, something's not good, yet it could be something structurally wrong.
So I think that's where we've got a bit of a balance. I look at it more from a technical and strategic perspective. Jem will look at the product, the end product. If the chips aren't right, we look at why it is, and I'll go to the other end and say, is the range operating correctly? Are we managing this? When was the last time this was maintained? You know, and we sort of work things out, because I think you need to really have a deep understanding of the equipment you're working with. You would not go around a racetrack without a car that's fully race prepared. Yeah. You would not do that. And it's the same for us. If we're putting out a product that's high quality, high standard, you're just not going to do it on a range that's been poorly maintained and cleaned.
Do you think range manufacturers, fridge manufacturers, do you think they could do more?
Yeah, I think they definitely could, and that's where I think there's definitely a market for a USP like that, where you've got a manufacturer who literally supports you all the way through. You know, ownership as well. So it's an aftercare. This is your product, you know, you should be really blowing out those compressor filters more often and things like that. The only reason we've got onto stuff like that, the preventative maintenance side of it, is because we have had issues with our fridges. They're only 3 years old. There was no issue with them whatsoever, other than there was dust build up, and so the compressors weren't performing. The fridge lost its temperatures, and so for me it was right from this point forward. We're gonna every 3 months make sure that they're hoovered and cleaned out, and that's that.
Looking back at it, my dad was always hot on sort of prevention. He always. And I remember on our Florigo, their Florigo, because I'm not in the business anymore, but their Florigo, we used to have a separate set of K&N air filters. You know the K&N air filters that go on cars? Yeah. That's what goes under the range, believe it or not.
Right.
And when we saw that, ideally, one of the range manufacturers goes, one of the range service guys goes, if you can change this every month or wash them. And I said, I'll just get a spare set. Cost how much they cost? 20 quid a head. Yeah. Change them out every week. Put the other one through the dishwasher, and it's ready, dry for the next week. Yep. And the performance difference was huge. Because, and again, waiting a year to sort of clean a filter is a long time.
Yeah. And that goes back to if you're using it 20 hours a week or 80 hours a week, it really has a big effect.
Yeah.
And on an air filter and things like that, you could end up just burning gas. You're burning money for no reason. You're not getting the efficiency.
And I think that's what impresses me about the Americans. The Americans have a real, when they buy, whether it's Pitcos, which is what they use, like Frymasters, Pitcos, stuff like that, they are obsessed with keeping on top of them. They wash them, generally, if they're a good operator, they wash them once a week. They're checking for any issues once a week. I think you mentioned a while ago that it's because the American consumer demands great food.
Well, they're very happy to complain about it if it's not up to their expectation. This steak's not good enough, I want another one. Yeah. They may have eaten half of it anyway, but that's just the way the Americans do things, and I don't think there's anything bad in that.
No, I don't think so either, but the way they maintain their equipment is pretty switched on. You read McDonald's, they have a week rotation, so every day one of their chip units or independent ranges gets washed out, and you think, I know people that have messaged me saying I've not washed mine since I've had it and it's 10 years old. Anything. And I think,
are you celebrating that fact? Or are you?
Yeah, some people are befuddled by it, so they're like, wow, do I need to really do it? And others are like, and then there's some people that, I guess there is people that don't care, but I think for the most part, people just haven't been told to do it. And I think as an industry, we do look at the likes of McDonald's and everything and think, they don't know what they're doing, it's crap food. And yet actually, it is mediocre food for a low price, to be fair. But it's very well executed, and I think
it's consistently that standard.
Yeah, exactly, and that's by design, isn't it? It isn't.
You know what you're getting when you go there, don't you?
Yeah, and I think, but it's just the absolute shame that a lot of people will complain at the $5,000 price, $1,000 to $5,000 price on a new pan, but they've done nothing to maintain it.
Yeah,
and I think you can't blame the range manufacturer, unless the range manufacturer's not told you how to maintain it. That's the only time you can blame them. I guess.
Yeah. I think there's definitely an opportunity there for range manufacturers to hold your hand with a new range, and certainly we've had that anyway with Westgate and buying ours from KFE.
I think what's good there is Simon was an engineer for so long, and a good engineer. I bet he's missed as an engineer. There's no doubt, but I bet he's also a great credit as a salesperson. To be fair, because he knows so much.
He knows the ins and outs of everything. Yeah.
And he's worked at both Dutch companies, isn't he?
Yeah.
So great wealth of experience to tap into there.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than a sales guy that doesn't know what he's talking about.
All right, I'm sitting here, mate.
All right.
No, it is
just
true.
Say his name.
No, but it is true.
That's why you deal with him, Jem. I just can't.
Bloody hell, guys. No, but it is sort of true. And he's a good person as well. I think that helps. When you talk to him, he's a genuinely nice person. Yeah. I think you meet a lot of salespeople in every field. And
the thing is, he's not a salesman.
No, yeah.
He's not that sort of person who's pushing for a sale. And he asks you what you want, and we get what we ask for. Yeah. And he can obviously educate us on everything that we need to know about the range and stuff. So.
Yeah, I'd rather be sold on a technical discussion than sold on a load of sales spiel.
Let's jump to sort of March time. You're in Kurdistan.
Yes.
You're in England.
Yep.
COVID hits. we get into sort of like, I remember our conversation started even before the furlough was announced, and explain to us a little bit how, like, are you shitting bricks? What's your thought processes? What are you dealing with over here, and what are you dealing with over there? So,
I mean, it was ever changing every single day. We were getting more advice and being alerted to different change of situation every single day. Obviously, the rise of cases, rise of deaths were going up every single day. I was obviously dealing with it from this country. Cihan was dealing with it from afar. So we were having to have discussions every single day of what we're going to do, how we're going to sort of move forward with it all. And it just got to the point where Cihan sort of decided that it's time to close. It's not safe enough. It's not worth our while being open and putting our staff and families at risk. So we decided to close on the Sunday, and then the following day the government announced the lockdown. McDonald's closed the doors.
It was actually McDonald's.
I think they made everyone's decision, didn't they?
They did. If a big corporate chain like that make that call, everyone wakes up a little bit, because it's not about money anymore.
Yeah.
It's a serious issue that you need to open your eyes to. For me, it was I was in a lucky position. I wasn't. I was locked in.
We saw the food he was eating.
Well, okay, the food's pretty good, but I had they locked down the borders, they shut down airspace, and they basically had a military lockdown. And that was before the lockdown in the UK.
I thought it was pretty normal.
Yeah. So we couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
And I was being in the Middle East and further over in that area, we're right next to Iran, which obviously they had the second highest number of cases following China. Yeah. So I knew that it was a very, very serious issue. So I'd gone through our emergency response plan, our crisis management for the business out there, and we'd gone through all of this, and we'd immediately, stepped it up to our level 4. And I'm going through all of this, and I'm going, well, geez, this is just going to happen in the UK at some point. Really need to be thinking about how we manage it.
Your team got chopped right down, didn't it? And
yeah, we demobilised as many people as we could before the airspace got closed, just to reduce our exposure and risk, and we'd come up with a bit of a strategy to manage it. And I wanted to do the same for us. And so I think it was the Friday, was actually when we started having this discussion. Mm-hmm. And I was saying, Jem, look, it's not going any other way. I'm not here to help anybody out or to look at this in any other way. So my gut feeling, standing back from this, it might feel fine in Lancaster right now, but it's only going to happen at some point. We need to be prepared for it, mm-hmm. and we need to be considering locking the shop door. And I don't want to put my staff at risk. Mm. Or you, because if we go into lockdown, I've got my wife and my 2 kids, and I don't want, the support network for those guys getting ill. So, my babysitter here,
I was going to say, come on, tell us.
He needed to be kept safe as well. So I think it was Saturday night we had a serious discussion. You were still kind of in the realms of, we can keep going for a bit. It's a bit, it seems to be okay. It's being managed. And I said, the problem is, on Facebook, all I'm seeing is tons of people out. They're ignoring this and treating
especially London at the time.
Yeah, they were treating it like a holiday, all getting together. And that's the part I can't control. I can control everything beyond my threshold. So if they come into the shop, I can ask them to maintain distance. I cannot control stupidity, outside of the shop. So I had to make a call on it, and we decided on the Sunday that was we were going to cut off, and that's what we did. And it turns out it was a good decision. I think when it comes to leadership and taking the lead, sometimes you need to know when. And that was a time where I decided, yes,
it's
we're
fair
the leaders on this.
Looking back, we may say we all overreacted.
I wouldn't say so, not at the time.
I'm just saying we could say that.
Yeah, we could do, yeah.
But
Absolutely.
we didn't know at the time. We didn't know how it was transmitted, how bad it was, how good it was, whatever. No one knew these things.
No.
It's like, and I think it's easy to say, oh well, it's not that bad if you get it, but we just didn't know, and who wanted to risk it?
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
And then there's the legal ramifications. What if your staff member gets it?
Yeah.
What if your customer gets it? What if they prove it? And you've got to, you sort of wonder, is it worth taking those risks?
Yeah, my reputation, our shops, I didn't want any of our shops to be the conduit for transferring this disease. So, yeah, it was a simple decision, and there's a ton of hindsight experts out there right now, all over Facebook and Twitter, saying how it should have been managed, but nobody had that information to.
In fairness,
to
they were experts of Brexit just before that as well.
Yeah. I mean, they're usually, the experts on everything, after the fact.
I think. A lot of people are mocking the government this time around, saying they're being a bit overcautious, and they're seeing rising cases. And I'm somewhere in the middle. If they tell me to wear a mask when I go out, like I did earlier, does it hurt me? No. If they told me in 3 months' time you wore a mask and it was a waste of time, it didn't really bother me. But at the same time, it could be the flip side. I could have saved someone if that was the case as well.
Yes.
I'm no hero, but I don't see the big deal. But I do see the difficulties within the hospitality industry. So the 10 p.m. curfew is an issue because restaurants can't get, especially restaurants that are struggling, they can't get 2 sittings at night. And you can see where there's probably a bit of leniency there, But then I suppose the government's argument is, well, after 10 o'clock, people get a bit merry and a bit happy and a bit too close. And so, there's a lot of lose-lose situations.
I think they're just taking a blanket risk management approach to it, and they're literally saying, what can we do to make sure this is the exposure to this is reduced, and so the fact that you can't have loads of people around at your house is just one easy way of doing it, but they're allowing people to go to restaurants to maintain some kind of economic turnover and keep the hospitality industry going.
A friend of mine was in London a few weeks ago, and he said, I'm paraphrasing a little bit because he'll listen to this and say that I've said it wrong, as always. He said that it's a failure, curfew, because afterwards everyone left the pubs and the restaurants and just stood outside. And he was saying that's a failure from the government's part. And I was saying, no, that's the human nature part. They know there's a curfew. Yeah. Why don't they just go home? He was saying to me that I didn't really understand that I wasn't there and I was getting it wrong. And I get his point because I wasn't there and I didn't see it. But at the same time, my point of view is the government have legislated for what they can control, that they can legally tell businesses to do X. Why don't the people, us lot, do our bit now and say, I've left that pub, I'm getting in a cab or a tube and I'm going straight home. Yeah. You can't blame the government because I decided to stand outside having a beer.
No, it's down to people's own common sense, isn't it?
Yeah. Or lack of.
I was going to say, common sense ain't so common, is it? No. But he was saying it was so difficult trying to get out of the restaurant that he was in and to get to his hotel because there were so many people just hanging about in the streets. And again, I understand his point, but that's not the government's fault. And he said, well, the police should have sent more people out to arrest people. Well, the problem is, and that infringes on civil liberties. Yes. And I was trying to explain that the UK has strong civil liberties, and you can imagine that uproar the next day if, 50 people in central London got £1,000 fine because they were outside finishing their beer. Yeah. So it's a lose-lose for the government. Whatever happens, the government generally is,
Yeah, I mean, they're always they're never going to have a one-size-fits-all solution to it. So they're never going to be able to say, this is the rule and it's going to work for 70 million people. The fact that people stand about outside at 10 o'clock at night, they have to take responsibility for that themselves. The government can't be responsible for you the whole time. And just because the government hasn't prescribed that you go home immediately at 10 o'clock, you've got to be, sensible about it. They have now. But all that comes out. Yeah. When you're sitting in a room crashing out the strategy for how we manage this issue, and they say, right, we'll close restaurants at 10 o'clock. Everyone agrees it's a good idea. It gets rolled out, and then they see the next problem that they've got to deal with, and they legislate for that. Yeah. And that's how these things have to.
I think
be managed.
People want to see the government ahead of it, but you can't because you need to see the problem in order to act on it. So, and I think
you can't predict behaviour.
No, and I think they tried to initially, and they said, and I think I read somewhere that it said the reason they didn't lock down 2 weeks before was because they said, well, if we add 2 weeks to the initial 3 weeks, remember it was meant to be a 3-week lockdown, which went into what? 2 months or like that. Yeah. So they were saying people will get sick of it, and they have, and they did. So I think the government was right, in hindsight, I think the government was right not to close when they did. And I read somewhere and it said that for the most part, again, not to be insensitive about people that passed away, but they probably would have had preconditions, and only some rare cases didn't. And I don't want to be insensitive because I know a few people that have sort of passed away. So, but they were older. They were unwell, let's say. Yeah. So obviously that's still someone's family member. So we've got to remember that. And I think the government genuinely is trying to get on top of that. And I see a lot of conspiracy theories coming from people that I like, that I respect, that have got good businesses. And you think, wow. But I don't think that's because they've gone crazy. I think everyone's just pretty much sick of it now. And they can't understand why it's still going off.
It's just an interesting spin. It keeps people,
Well, it probably stops them from going mental, doesn't it? In one way, and they've gone mental in another way. Yeah. But it is interesting. But I think if we look at sort of our industry at the time, I think our industry's probably done okay. I think.
Yes.
We're discussing that this morning. I think as a whole, we have been quite fortunate, really, in the fact that we've been allowed to open sooner than other industries and stuff like that, and we haven't been too restricted on the way we can operate. I mean, we've been able to introduce click and collect systems, delivery and stuff like that, whereas others haven't been able to offer them sorts of things to be able to operate and still sort of do the similar sort of turnover we were doing previously. Some people have benefited even further and doing even more than what they were. They've cut their hours down and they're doing the same turnover, or they're making more money. So we have been quite fortunate in that way, whereas obviously restaurants, as you were saying, they've been restricted to one sitting an evening. They've had to take tables out of the restaurant so they can't physically get as many people on. Yeah. Whereas with the click and collect system that we've now implemented, we're doing 3 orders every 5 minutes. So in a way, we've increased our capacity because we've got bigger orders coming. People know we know what people have ordered, so we can get that ready in advance. And it's worked really well for us, hasn't it? I
think one of the things that I probably think from our industry point of view, because we're going to look at our industry because it's the industry we're in, I think some people were genuinely perplexed about the advice. And even now, how many times, let's be honest, when the grant was announced, over the next few weeks, how many times would the word grant in a post on Facebook?
It's like masks at the moment.
Yeah, it's like masks at the moment. It's exactly that. And I think, because the advice was coming thick and fast from government and sometimes changing, I think one thing I'd like to see is maybe our sort of trade body just saying we're waiting before we release advice, rather than it being a rolling thing. Oh, this got said, this got said, this got said. Oh, this changed. Yeah. I don't know what you two think about that. Well, I do know what you two think about that, but I don't know if you want to mention it here.
Yeah, I've got no problem saying that. I think sometimes there was a rapid response. There was always quick information coming out, and the latest information. You could always be sure to see it. However, sometimes just waiting it out a little bit to make sure that your interpretation of the information was correct is probably the best way to go. I mean, you look at 4 or 5 different news outlets. You could look on the BBC site, Sky News, ITV, Daily Mail and Express, something like that. And they would all have a slightly different spin or interpretation of what the rules were. Until that was clarified, until that was absolutely clear, I think it was probably a better idea potentially to just hold off with that information. Just say, look, I know everybody's concerned about this. It affects everybody in our industry, but we're just waiting for clarification, and we'll do a press release as soon as possible.
I almost feel like the official response should have been, you will get an official response, when we have an official response. Yeah. Not, here's a little bit, oh, that's just changed, here's another little bit, that's just changed, here's another little bit, that's just changed. Yeah. And I understand the argument of, well, it's a fast-moving thing, but just stop, wait, relax.
I think what was quite good was seeing the diverse number of issues everyone was facing in the same industry. So some people with chip vans was very different to somebody that's got a restaurant, somebody that's just got a takeaway, somebody that's trying to manage both. So they came up with all sorts of different scenarios, not because they came up with them, but because that's what they had with them. Yeah. And that gave something to think about, and perhaps the advice then could be built around those categories or those type of operators, and therefore it's more specific and closes out more of the concerns and questions that people had.
Yeah, I think everyone's going to be to some degree an expert in crisis management after this, because to some degree everyone's had to do it. You know, I don't think anybody, if you're in PR for politics or something, or a big company like Unilever, you would have done crisis management. But I think we've all been taught a lesson in crisis management. You know, I think, you know, when this all came down, I think I told you earlier, like, rather than sort of do the podcast and everything, after I knew that I was okay and that Ceres wasn't going to go bust, because I think that was our initial fear. Like, you know, everything we'd built could have been sideswiped by
we were just staring down a black hole, weren't we?
But once we knew the furlough was in and the loans were in, everything just, let's relax, like, you know, and actually let's do the garden. So once you know, so I think once we knew that, I sort of decided, and I think I told you this when you was all party to this, that we would just put out the content, written content we always wanted to put out pre-COVID. And I thought written content was probably better than audio content at that point, because, you know, it could be things that people were worried about. So some of the articles that, as you know, we did were like, you know, what to do if you had to stay open, you know, or not had to, but wanted to stay open. I think we never, you know, privately we would have discussed opening and closing, but from a business point of view, we just wanted to support everyone. Like, I think, and, you know, some of the articles we put out was, if you've got to stay open, do this, and if you've closed, do this. You know, and I think I didn't want to be, as a company, judgmental in that respect. And I think to play devil's advocate, I can see why some people stayed open. Some people would reach out to me and say, I was worried that I'd never reopen. You know, and I get that. I you know, I can see the fear. You know,
the frustration for me when I was reading some posts about, do I stay open or close? And you get people saying, if I close, the guy down the road's going to take all of my business.
Yeah, well, that's always been a fear of people in general in our industry.
Yeah, but it couldn't be further from the truth, I don't think, you know.
I suppose it all depends on how confident you are about your products and your offering and your service. And,
yes.
But, I think that some shops that stayed open did very well. Some just tickled away and did what they did. And then, obviously, I think one of the biggest arguments was people shouldn't get the loan or the grant if they stayed open. And I was just like, but that wasn't never what it was for. It was never set for that. The government just needed to give everyone money just in case. And I think, you know, but again, there's contradictions everywhere. You know, and the government have got better at targeting funds as they've gone along. I do think, you know, I'll give it some context. One of my customers, I told you earlier over breakfast, one of my customers was genuinely petrified. He said whenever he saw a comment, mostly from Andrew, /NFFF, he was just worried. What's it going to say? Why am I closed? You know, and he said he's shut for 4 weeks. He couldn't really afford it, but it was okay once the money started coming in, like from the government. You know, but he said, like, you know, what we don't consider is the depression side, you know, that people's, you know, some people's business is their life, isn't it? Yeah.
That's all they've got.
And, you know, and the thought of that breaking apart scares them. Like, so even if they open and stick to that routine, you know, they feel like, I've got to stay open. And I think, and I've said it all along, I just think the biggest issue for me was the advice should have been, here's what to do if you stay open, and here's what to do if you close. If you stay open, get yourself some masks, get yourself some perspex, maybe don't let customers through the door, do deliveries. Yeah. But it wasn't, it was just, I remember it was like Saturday, it's our duty to stay open. Yeah, I remember those words. It's our duty to feed the nation. By Sunday, that was the rhetoric. By Monday morning, it was, we've got to close. It's our responsibility to the nation. And I was like, and I could see where people got really aggravated about that, because some people just wanted to stay open. So I can see how that blame got transferred to Andrew. Like, not fairly, in my view. He was just giving the advice he thought was right.
Yeah, messenger.
You know, messenger as such. But again, I just don't think I would have been telling people to do anything.
No, I think one of the things that, you know, if you're in that position, one of the best things you could have done is give the tools to the people to make a decision.
Yeah.
Show them how to work through a risk matrix and go through, you know, what questions you need to ask, what mitigation measures you can put in place. Is that acceptable? Yes or no?
Yeah. Move
to the next stage gate. You know, and if you can go through that decision-making process, it becomes very easy. The answer drops out. It's not something that you need. Me and Jem had this conversation on the Saturday night. So we had been talking about it, and your overall feeling was, we don't need to close. And I said, okay, let's go through it. And I went through each little stage gate, and I said, okay, this one, we failed. We can't move on. if you can't sort this one out and we can't put mitigations in place for this issue, we cannot get to the next stage. So it's a no, and that's all it is. It's you'll see this. You probably have seen it a lot. So in process safety or something like that, they use this Swiss cheese model, and it's basically a load of slices of cheese lined up with your holes in the cheese. If those holes align, you've got an issue. Yeah. If you can put a piece of cheese in the way that's not got a hole there and it blocks the hole up, you've mitigated the risk of something travelling through that. And it's the similar sort of way. Basically, you're going through a stage-gated process of decision making. If you could have given that tool to some of these operators, they would have been able to work it through for their scenario. They would have been able to say, my chip shop, my chippy van does this. Okay, well, you cannot manage that risk, so close. And that's that.
And again, it goes back to what you guys said earlier. The fact is, you can control what happens in your doors, in your building, let's say, but you can't control how customers are in that environment. And that's why you guys reopened. And is there customers allowed in the shop yet? Or?
No. So what we've done, we've basically took the glass out of the door and made a push-through drawer, similar to a what's it called? One of the bank traps.
Bank drops, money drop.
Yeah. Same sort of thing. The bag goes into the drop and we push it through. So at both shops, we've obviously started up a click and collect system, and now from Westgate as well, we're doing deliveries as well.
Just to clarify, it's actually more like the petrol station night thing.
Yeah, that's it. It's a night hatch. It's a night hatch. I also saw them in post office. You know, large parcels. You pop them through, and they go through in a drawer. So that was the idea that we took on.
Anybody have an issue with that? Or?
Everyone loves it. They feel incredibly safe operating in that way. We do as a business, like all of our staff, are really, really happy to be working in isolation behind the shop front. So it's not even behind a sneeze screen. For me, a sneeze screen wasn't. It was lip service to safety, but that's not to like have anything against anybody that did take that system. It depended on their shop and their perception of risk and their management of risk. For me, there was a better solution, and we came up with it, which was basically to put these panels in the door entries, which were completely sealed all the way around, and you just had a drawer that went through. It was almost like an airlock, and people just pick their bag up and go. Yeah. And that worked perfectly well with our click and collect system. The two worked hand in hand very well.
I went to McDonald's recently, and I saw what they do for their delivery system. They've got McDonald's labels that seal all the bags, and I guess that's because they worry about people pinching food on the delivery. And I thought that was quite cool. I don't know, it's like a little label on the bag, like stops people from breaking it. And if it's broken when it gets there, I suppose someone would complain, I guess.
Yeah. You just try to upsell your labels now or something?
No, I'm not. No, I just saw it. No, I just saw it. If you want them, but it just made sense. Like, again, it's how you see an issue and you overcome it. And I think they are the greatest at overcoming issues. Like, and it's just a little simple fix like that. You know, and I think it just they had to overcome a lot, because I think for them it was the legal point of view. Yes, can we do it operationally? Now let's prove it, and because otherwise they're going to get sued.
It's a liability thing. Yeah.
And I think that's one thing they always look at. And you could argue that's not the best motivation, but it is. It's the way to get a big corporation like that to get into gear, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, but I think everybody's sort of put their thinking caps on and really sort of challenged the status quo and said, this is okay. I could do it a lot better. People would be much happier if I did it this way, and I think we've seen a lot of support locally from our customers and new customers as well, purely because of our attitude to managing the COVID situation. Like I say, that some people that have been completely isolating themselves at home or keeping themselves in a bit of a bubble, they're more than happy to come to our shop because they know that they're going to stand outside and be called forward when it's ready. So they're in.
We've never had more than 3 people stood outside at any one time, have we?
No, apart from when the till went down.
Yeah.
And it's always on a Friday, but the till system crashed on us, which was lovely.
No, but in general, we only have like 3 people outside the shop, and
that's it. Yeah.
Turning over every 5 minutes.
Do you think click and collect is here to stay?
For us, absolutely,
Yeah.
and for any shop that hasn't done it yet, they should absolutely consider it. For me, it was something that was never ever going to be introduced to Packet Bridge. We had a very, very busy shop at Packet Bridge. In my opinion, we were operating at our absolute capacity. We couldn't take on additional revenue streams at all. Now we've been forced to by this situation. We've introduced this way of working, and we're only click and collect. I wouldn't go back.
Yeah.
I actually want to keep it a click and collect shop altogether. Everybody's sort of moved with the times. All of our customers, by that I mean, they've all got used to the system very quickly, and they're all very happy with it. And we found a new capacity. So our new maximum has been discovered by doing click and collect, because you're basically spreading out your customer over your opening hours, rather than concentrating it between 6 and 7. Having a huge queue which people drive up to and drive past because they don't want to wait in that.
When also you know what they're having in advance, which, let's face it, you've now removed the need for the customer to come in the shop, stare at the menu and be like...
Yeah, so ours all pop up every 15 minutes, so we're already preparing the order for 15 minutes' time. And, you know, like you say, you know exactly what they're having. And what we've found as well, we're getting a lot more bigger orders as well, which has been good.
Yeah, so we had to upgrade our till system. We had already upgraded it only a few months previous, but we did a secondary upgrade to have a screen next to the fryer, which then puts the pre-a-day orders on the screen, so they knew what to fry 15 minutes before their collection slot. That's just helped our production line no end at all. But what we found is we've got less wastage, because obviously we're cooking everything to order with 15 minutes notice. We've got bigger orders, like Jem said, and that's because people are scrolling through a menu, they're just adding things on. You know,
they're trying things that they probably wouldn't have tried before as well. It's like, oh, I fancy that. Whereas before they were coming in with probably the right change, and they're having 2 fish and 1 lot of chips, and that's what they have every time, and they bring the exact...
Our regular customers probably didn't look at the menu anymore. Yeah. They probably just got to the till and ordered what they always had. Just
autopilot.
Yeah, but now they're scrolling through because we've set it up that they have to, and they're picking more items off the menu, and they're doing it more regular as well. So it's been an excellent.
Do you think
addition?
Cash payments are dead for the industry?
I don't think they're dead. I think they're always going to have a place, but we certainly would encourage the card and contactless payments from this point forward. It's just become so easy, to manage.
No cashing up at the end of the night, is there?
No, and you know, for me as a guy not in the country, I'm more than happy.
It shows up on a screen.
Every transaction's got a digital thing.
Yeah, Cihan's able to monitor it from afar. And from a safety perspective as well, we were broken into in October 2015, weren't we? Yeah. And if that stops that from ever happening again, then I'd definitely encourage having a cashless.
It seems to become a bit of a political issue, like the whole cash is dead sort of thing. I understand why it's contentious, but I do think what's going to slow down the use of cash is the operational costs. If a lot less cash is being taken, it's going to cost more to bank it. It's going to cost more to get change out.
Banks are changing. You do not have cashiers anymore in banks. It's all automated service, and if you're handling a lot of cash, that becomes a bit of a pain to deal with, and you've got specific windows where you need to do your banking. Otherwise your money's not in the bank in order to pay your bills. I've got no concerns over that anymore at all. The money's there 3 days later, and it's constantly coming in now.
It just keeps coming.
Every 3 days. I don't have to say to Jem, where's last week's takings, Jem? Have you? Yeah. Do you want to pop the money in anytime soon?
It's all been banged on red.
Yeah.
No, I think one of the biggest issues is, I think I can see where a lot of people say the elderly and they ain't got a phone to use, but if they're doing click and collect, then I suppose that solves that.
Yeah, I mean, what we've done for people that aren't able to operate the internet and or whatever, they're able to call the shop, and what I've trained obviously the staff to do is manually input it into our click and collect system themselves. Obviously put the name, and then basically they've got a place in our queue for our click and collect system, rather than saying, oh, so and so's turning up for a phone order at 6:15, because then that adds another person to that 6:15 time slot, and then
Yeah.
if you've got 2 or 3 people that are wanting that time slot as well as all your click and collect, you physically can't do it. So they're just we're just manually inputting their place into the digital queue.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I do think, I think last year Mark Drummond said that accepting debit cards, he'd negotiated debit card fees to be the same as banking cash. It was almost the same, bar a penny or two. How long before that flips? How long before actually just accepting debit cards is going to be cheaper than handling cash?
I think it already is.
Yeah.
I think it already is for us anyway. We've just negotiated our rates and got a very good deal, but because of volume, our customer spending, obviously we've gone from, I think it's probably 40% on cards and 60% cash to 100% cards overnight. Yeah. So that, straight away, you've got a whole load more of negotiating power with your card supplier or your merchant. Yeah. And therefore you can negotiate a far better rate for handling that cash. But, if you take the time out of having to count that up, go to the bank, process it, the charges you get for that, you've got to consider your own time in all of these transactions.
It's another way of making you more efficient, isn't it?
Yeah, it just gives you that hour to do something else for your business, like blow out the compressors on your fridges.
But also, like you say, from an accounting point of view, it's just a few minutes of reconciliation.
Absolutely, yeah.
Just fairly easy, I guess.
Yeah.
So overall, how would you rate so far the government's performance in helping business? I don't want to go into the whole other bit.
I think personally, I think they've done a very good job of a very, very difficult and unprecedented situation. I think they've offered. If we start at the beginning, the first thing that they offered was the furlough.
Yeah.
Fantastic scheme. As an employer which manages, we've got let's say 20 staff across the 2 shops, and the number of families that then affects. Probably 6 or 7 families. Without that scheme, they were staring down the barrel of not being able to pay their bills, their mortgages, things like that. Let's go even simpler, putting food on the table. They just couldn't do it. So that 80% was an excellent help to all those people. And for us personally, we topped everybody up to 100% because we wanted to make sure that everyone of our staff weren't affected at all by this, because generally people operating in those sort of food service industries and things like that, they're getting by. They haven't got that 20% surplus to lose. So for me, we topped them up to 100%.
Yeah, a lot of our staff have been with us for a very long time as well, and I think it was a bit of an opportunity for us to give back to them as well, wasn't it? Because they've dedicated a lot to us by sticking with us for a long period of time.
They're very, very loyal, very good members of staff. So we just felt like we needed to look after them during this time. They didn't need to feel stress or worry during this period. We could take it. And then came along the grant.
You missed out the VAT thingy, the deferment as well. That was initially.
Oh, that's correct. Yeah, they did. Yeah, so I mean, from a cash flow perspective, that was an excellent help. Certainly helped us in the beginning because we didn't
due that.
We were due to make that payment. That's what helped us make the decision to top everyone up, because we could defer that VAT payment. And then we got the grant. So the grant then kept us all going until we decided to open our doors again. Beyond that, then there was the C bills, or the bounce back loans. Again, a great scheme for people that needed it. There's obviously concerns of how are people going to pay these back and are the businesses going to survive afterwards. But at the moment, the government are just looking at how to keep things going and look after people. And I think that has been at the forefront of their decision making. I think they genuinely have. It hasn't helped everybody, and no approach can. There are going to be people that fall through the net. They're going to be self-employed people. I know that there was a lot of people that operate their shops as self-employed. They're paying themselves very low wages, if any at all, and then just paying themselves dividends. And that works. It's tax efficient and things like that. But you can't expect to get the same benefits, that when this whole scheme came out. So that was addressed later on. I think they were I think they looked at their profits and things like that, and were able to make payments based on previous profit. Then I think it was the VAT reduction. I think dropping it down to 5% for us in our industry, hospitality, I think that's been excellent. And I think it's been something that has been needed for a long, long time. Obviously, that doesn't affect those shops which weren't VAT registered anyway. But for us, both of our shops are VAT registered, and it did make a big difference to us. And it's something that I'd like to see last a lot longer than January.
But I think it is now, isn't it? March,
is it just to March now? Yeah. But
you got your wish.
Yeah, I did.
It's a lot longer.
No, I did. I think I did say March would be good, but I think it really, that's where it needs to be.
Yeah, I think what I'd like to see from the government. How many more years they got in power? 3 or something? 3.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. I think if they really want to get another term, they really need to sort of sort out this whole Brexit thing, because that's looming, obviously.
Yes.
You know, and but I would love to see, with this majority, them actually use it for clearing up the tax code, clearing up the VAT system.
Yeah.
You know, really looking at it, and because it has become quite bulky and grey, and and obviously the more complicated it is, the more grey areas, the more loopholes.
Yeah, I mean, for me, an easier and fairer VAT system would be a lower rate, but there's no threshold, so it's zero and everybody pays into it.
I've spoken to Mark Drummond, who's almost like the industry VAT expert, and he's like, the problem is with that. And I don't know, just to throw it in as devil's advocate, because I sort of agree with a lower rate.
Yeah.
He's saying the problem is it's the people that have like small enterprises. So someone who's just selling something little on Etsy or a market stall, you know, they would presumably then have to do VAT returns, but they probably might do, I don't know, well under 50 grand a year, probably 30 grand a year. But it's a lot of paperwork for that. I said to him, I still don't see the issue. Now it's all online, it's not an issue, you know.
A lot of the e-commerce systems, they do it for you anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
And the VAT thing, you know, okay, so all you're doing is moving a problem and addressing it. Yeah. So saying we do nothing about the VAT system because of the small guy that's on Etsy, I think, you know, that shouldn't be our reason not to. Just
clear it up. Just say they're VAT exempt.
There's a study that's been done. I think it was years ago, and there's a chart. It's quite good if you want to have a look at it. It's called the Laffer curve, and it's a guy that basically did a study on basically countries' tax receipts versus tax rate. And I think basically if you reduce the tax rate, there's a point at which you actually receive more tax receipts as a country, and I think that's where I'd like to see things go.
Do you think, is that the same thing as what Thatcher did back in the day? A very similar thing, because tax was a lot higher back than income tax, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm not really
anecdotally,
sure.
obviously.
Yeah. I mean, we've got on our income tax, we've got 3-4 thresholds now. Yeah. Because you've got the zero marginal rate at 105 grand or whatever it is, and I think that really confuses things always round. If you had a flat rate of income tax that doesn't matter what you earn, you know, you'd have less cash in hand jobs going on, you know, and less undeclared income, because it's just a straightforward tax return at the end of the day. And then you've also got your VAT. If that was just a nice simple number but it was applied to everything, then, you know, for me that's where it should be.
I'm a big fan of VAT being under 10%.
Yes,
I think who isn't? And then widening the pool, make it a bigger pool. So, for example, they say that VAT is value-added tax. So, you know, if you go buy bread from the supermarket, it has no VAT. Bread and butter has VAT. And I get it. It's just a bit old in the tooth. I'm not being funny. Bread and butter in the year 2020 is not a luxury item. Yeah, no. I just don't get it. But they'll say, well, if you make a sandwich at home, there's no VAT. But if you buy a sandwich from Subway that's cold, there's no VAT. Or you buy from the supermarket, there's no VAT. But surely buying a sandwich is a luxury.
It's a convenience.
It's a convenience.
It saves you.
So if you could then say all the cafes, all the supermarkets, all out-of-home food, if there's something you could have made yourself but you chose to buy it, that should incur a 10% VAT or a 5% VAT. Now, some would argue, but imagine collecting it. Really? If you told Tesco tomorrow that all ready-made food had 5% VAT on it because, again, it's a convenience.
Yeah, the meal deals would be £3.15 rather than £3.
Exactly, and as if they're not going to pay it or collect it and pass it on. Of course they would, So I think that for me, I think all out-of-home food should be included in the VAT system. And whilst we're there, make it under 10%. Actually, 5% is great at that level. If you can bring in another 200,000 businesses, and it's more than that, but if you can bring all those into the fold, why are we penalising takeaways in restaurants? And what we saw over COVID is how much people use restaurants and takeaways.
Yeah.
And I think,
rely on them.
And rely on them because
Yeah.
they, couples work together, or they've both got a business, or they both work. You work abroad, and Jen works, and you're single. But do you know what I mean? It's like most couples. It's not like it used to be in the 50s and 60s.
Just for any of the ladies out there.
For any of the ladies out there, any industry ladies.
But they are family-run businesses, aren't they? And that's what people need to.
Yeah, and I think for me, the biggest thing is it is not a luxury eating out anymore. It is a necessity. So you might as well.
It's a culture.
Yeah, it's a culture.
It's become normal to eat out. You want to go out every now and again. You don't want to cook 7 days a week.
And I do believe we have become a little bit European in that respect. Yeah. British. There was a time when British didn't snack. We had our 3 meals a day, and it was always frowned upon to pick. And now it's like, no, we're very European. I think in that respect, if anything, we've took that off the Europeans. We've become like that. We eat out later. We drink out more. We work hard. Well, they don't do that. But so do you know what I mean? I think you can't say to people wanting to work 50 hours a week and juggle a family and go to the gym and be healthy. Yeah. You can't do all these things, and then taxing them for the benefit as well. So eating out and paying 20%. I just think the definition of value added needs to be looked at. Yeah. And I think
it's robbing Peter to pay Paul. So if you reduce the tax rate, but you apply it to everything. All the hot food, the takeaways, the restaurants,
or even cold food that is
some cold foods. Yeah, you're going to basically reduce the cost of those, and you're going to slightly increase some of the colder prepared foods and things like that. So it would balance out. Your tax receipts overall would be probably the same or more.
Well, one thing I'd correct you on is that I think that the tax receipts would be more. However, I wouldn't truly believe that the cost of takeaway food would go down.
Possibly not. Yeah, I wouldn't change my prices.
Exactly, that's what I'm getting at. So no. I think most people would just choose to absorb the margin and give them a bit more room for margin.
Well, I think I'd probably then it gives me that money to look to invest in,
which then has another stimulus, doesn't it?
Yeah. Better equipment, another site maybe. Better quality food and produce to start with. Packaging, get your packaging branded, all that sort of stuff. It gives gives businesses the free cash to be able to look at those things.
And also, if we look at that right now, where a lot of people the VAT drop came in, there was a lot of discussion on the groups, some of it one-sided, and a lot of people saying, "Are you going to drop it?" And you guys didn't drop it,
no.
But you guys chose to take the safety net of building up the bank balance a little bit because you don't know what's around the corner. Is that a fair example?
I just feel that we've been in a bit of an unfair system for a long period of time, and like you say, with what's gone on this year and everything, it's time for us to benefit a little bit from that as well. And like you say, I agree that it should be put permanently down at that sort of figure at 5%.
Yeah, I mean we chose not to for many reasons, and some of those were to improve our our service and our
I mean we put our prices. We usually put our prices up every year, and we've not actually increased our prices since January last year.
We absorbed that, so we didn't do a price increase this year. So it's not changed for the customer. The 15% has given us some of that back, but it's allowed us to invest in some new equipment, like I've said, as well as our systems that we've heavily invested in.
As well.
We've just we've given all our staff decent increases as well. Yeah. So I think it's just to make sure that we are here.
I think in my view though, the government didn't make it explicit. They didn't say you must drop it to customers. All they said was change the VAT rate.
Yeah.
That was it. They didn't say anything. And a part of me thinks they left it grey on purpose, so people could interpret what they wanted out of it. And if someone wanted to drop it, that was okay too. But if you didn't, that's okay too. I don't think anybody should be forced and shamed into doing something they don't want to do. And I remember there was a hotel in Cornwall somewhere, and people were ringing up saying, "Oh, is it cheaper now?" And he goes, "No." He goes, "Because I interpret this VAT cut as a way of staying in business." You know, and I think that's a way of interpreting it as well.
There's a number of things that we've had to absorb just to maintain our or just to be in business right now with COVID. You're providing extra PPE, sneeze guards. You know, you've got to manage things completely different. Your capacity's changed, and I think some of that 15% goes towards helping you do that. If you're having to provide hand sanitizer to every customer that comes in and things like that.
Yeah. And I think, just to reiterate this point, there is no shame in just wanting to build that bank balance. Yeah. Like, you know, how can you build a roof for a rainy day?
That's right.
Yeah, and exactly, and that's another. And I think, you know, I must admit, like, a lot of people reached out to me and they were like, "What are others doing? What are others doing?"
Yeah, we're not in business to break even.
No, and we don't actually know what's around the corner. We feel like we're out of the woods, and we feel like we're getting used to this chaos, but we've got a long winter ahead of us.
Yeah, I mean, we've been put off doing deliveries for a long time, haven't we? We sort of said we were never going to look at doing it. And then obviously the VAT reduction was introduced, and we just said, well, why don't we just absorb the cost of going with one of our local aggregators and start doing delivery? So, well, obviously some of that VAT has now gone on the cost of our delivery service now. So, but we've increased our turnover because of that as well. So that's been good.
I think the government's done a lot of things that will help in the long run, but people will get a taste for this 5%. There is no doubt. And if I was, you know, the NAAF, the Hospitality UK, everybody, I think straight after this, it's hitting the government and saying, guys, like, or women, however, this has to stay, or something like this has to stay. But the problem is, and Mark Drummond sort of educated me on this, the VAT is the biggest gross income for the UK.
Absolutely.
You know, so something needs to, you know, they're not going to put a lot, and he sort of said that governments generally don't make big changes for neutral gains. Yeah, it has to be a benefit to the economy. For all
even
that
if
effort.
it's tax simplification, and that does have a
that
tangible.
Always look good. Yeah, that always looks good to the populace. Yes. You know? So I think for me though, I just think that my interpretation of food that is a luxury is probably a modern interpretation, and eating out isn't a luxury. Mm-hmm. Eating out is just being fed.
Yeah.
You know. I think, and you can see, because the amount of volume that got driven through supermarkets was intense. They just weren't ready for it. A friend of mine supplies supermarkets, and he was on the podcast. He got told off afterwards, actually, because they're a publicly listed company, and he said he was busy, and that apparently shifted the shares. And he got told off, which is quite cool. Which I like him getting told off. But, you know, we didn't think about it, to be honest. Who does? Like, and he was saying the volumes, it was like Christmas every day. He goes, all of a sudden...
Toilet rolls and...
it was everything, wasn't it? Shelves were empty.
And you can see why, because... All right, joking aside, toilet rolls was a bit silly.
Yeah, there's a lot of panic buying.
There was a lot of panic buying, but at the same time, if people aren't going to work and using toilet roll at work, you can understand how, even if they didn't panic buy, the volume of using toilet roll at home, and I think it just needed a few weeks for all the wholesale product to be shifted to retail.
That's right, yeah.
And you know, everyone's like, oh, there's a shortage on flour, There wasn't a shortage on flour.
Just needed to be redistributed.
Yes, there was a shortage on flour in 1.5 kilo bags, because the majority of flour in the UK is actually 16 kilo bags. So straight away, it's like there wasn't enough throughput on the 1.5 kilo lines. So it was just interesting, because I think everyone thought there were shortages. The food supply was strong. It was just shifting it to retail. And I know, well, how many, I think Tesco's, Asda's, they've all employed so many people on the delivery side, bought new vehicles in record timing. So, you know, so I do think, like, in, let's say 6 months. In 6 months, we've seen huge change, and we're all back to normal and sort of used to it.
Yeah.
And I think that is a credit to, like, everyone that wants to slag off their neighbour or the government or whatever. Actually stand back and look at how well we all actually did. Like,
yeah, I think we've been very resilient.
Yeah.
I think we've shown. I mean, that people have definitely diversified their businesses and been dynamic. They've been able to look at the situation and change and seriously say, this is going to be here for the long term. We need to change our model to manage that. And hang on a second, this is better. This is actually better for us to manage it in this way, and therefore...
I think it's given quite a lot of people a well-needed kick up the backside, that sort of weren't focusing a lot of attention on the shop. They were just ticking over and sort of happy doing what they were doing.
In fairness, though, you can see the attraction there.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Like plod along a bit.
Yeah, absolutely,
A lot of them, it's just a lifestyle business, and that lifestyle might be lazy.
So, oh God, I know you can say that. Just that was Cihan and not Jem. Before Jem gets knocked out.
Whilst he's sat at his desk in Iraq.
It's never lazy in fish and chips. It's very hard work.
Whatever. I think there's always going to be room for the sort of lower turnover businesses, whichever it's fish and chip shops. You know, like for example, a local B&B is at the Hilton. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think the government's got to try to support everybody. And I think, but where does it end? You know, and I think, you know, like the threshold. I understand why some people want to keep the threshold, but I understand why others don't. But at some point, the government's got to make a decision and say, yeah, the threshold's a bit silly or it's good, and just tell us why they've come to that conclusion.
But would it give people that are sort of trying to keep below that threshold a bit of a push to give their business a bit of an improvement? And
it would, but they might not like that. You know, like that.
But I would say to that, why are you in business?
You would say that.
I would say that, yeah.
And they would say, because I want a lifestyle business.
Some deliberately close their doors for 3 months and you know, through the winter and go elsewhere. Because the shop's just not busy enough, and there's the other benefit of
they've earned enough in the summer.
Yeah, and I suppose and rather than the government allowing businesses to bicker over it, oh, that's unfair, blah blah blah. They just need to make the decision and say, here's what we decided on, you know. But I actually think that some sort of simplification would be better, because at the moment it was all a bit, well, this has always been like that. And, you know, they need to really look at it and say, well, actually, it is the year 2020. We can fix this, or 2021, because they're not doing it this year. So they can say, well, we've looked at it, and it was a bit messy over COVID, and now's a great time to inject some stimulus into it.
One thing I'd like, and this goes back to Dodo Pizza, and the podcast with that, and having some radical transparency.
Yeah. Go on, Jan.
Yeah, I'd love to see that in from our tax system, and literally see where the money's coming in from. Which sectors?
Sorry to interject. Yeah. So to give you a live example, so if I went on to www.whopaysmytaxes or whogivestaxes.com, for argument's sake, and I then put a postcode in, and it's yours, and it then says Packet Bridge X amount of tax.
Possibly not that far. I'd be happy for that. There's no problem in that. But I mean on a even higher level, really. What industries are giving us the cash? You know, which sectors? You know, and just have some data.
I think it is available. It's just not publicised.
It's not publicised.
You have to go find it.
I'm sure it's somewhere in ONS.
I must admit, like, I don't know if you heard the episode with Dodo Pizza, Jem. I don't know. I guess not. Yeah, I guess not. He doesn't do a lot, does he? He only listens to his own on repeat. Yeah. But no, it is. So what we're getting at is, Jem, is that they have a website, and it's Dodo Pizza Story.
Yeah.
You go on there, tells you everything, and I mean.
Yes, it's the Russian one.
Yes.
Yes, I did listen to it.
So and you literally, it has a list of all the countries for a start. It says what's their best, and you know, and everything. And I thought, a part of me thought, this ain't right, it's gimmicky. Like when I was doing the pre-questions with him, and he goes, it's not a gimmick. He goes, there's anything you want to find, it's in there. And then I was like, okay then. And just by chance, I only found Dodo Pizza because they're down the road from my mother-in-law's house.
Right.
So, and I said to the wife, well, I wonder, because it's next door to a co-op. And I said, I wonder if it's owned by the co-op. So I quickly Google it, and it says, no, biggest Russian pizza chain. I was like, nah, get lost. So I go on LinkedIn, and that's where I found him. And I was like, I'm thinking, like, this guy says everything. Max, his name is.
Yeah.
It bloody says everything, everything. And I'm like, that's not normal. And
like transparent.
But I like that.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, we've had, I wouldn't call it radical transparency, but for a long time at Packet Bridge, we had a weekly pie chart, and it basically said where all the money had gone.
Yeah.
All of my staff knew I wasn't raking it in. You know, it wasn't like they know there's costs in there that they don't even know exist. and things that we have to pay out for. They hadn't realised we pay so much in VAT.
Yeah.
You know, even that's even the staff working there. So never mind the customers understanding that they're paying VAT on our products.
Yeah.
So, you know, just having that, your utility bills, your rents and mortgages, your loans that you're managing, all that stuff, just transparent out there.
Yeah.
And a little tiny slice left for a rainy day. It's not even guaranteed my income or my return. You know, that little slice that's left might get wiped out next week when I have a pan change.
Yeah.
And there was quite a few weeks.
Yeah.
There was quite a few weeks where we had serious negatives.
Yeah.
So I didn't have enough money that week to cover the bills, and it was good for the staff to understand that. So that transparency isn't a bad thing at all.
I don't know, like one thing Dodo Pizza do, you can log in now and have a look. If you want to go to Dodo Pizza Warsaw, it actually shows them working. Yeah. And I think my dread is that you log in and someone's standing there picking his nose. Yeah. But I said, like, have you ever had problems? Because of course we have. Like, he goes, but at least you can see it and talk about it. But they've just massively expanded. They've gone into coffee, a separate business.
He said he was going to start coffee.
And they've started another thing, which is, like German Doner Kebab, GDK.
Mm-hmm.
And you think, well...
Oh, did they own that?
No, they've done that type of concept.
Oh, right,
I can't remember what it was called. And you think, like... You know, again, like through COVID, these guys have just carried on with their plans, pushing forward. And you know, and when he gets it wrong, Maxim, he's quite cool about it. Have you followed him on LinkedIn yet?
No, not yet. I might do after this.
Yeah, but he put on there the week. He goes, we just opened a shop in Leamington. He goes, and you know, it's a bit frustrating. Someone's copied our wording, not the brand, but the wording. And then the guy who he accused was his friend on LinkedIn. So he's like, no, mate, you copied us. Like, and I'm just reading it thinking, what am I seeing here? Like, But he goes, 1 minute, he goes, so show us what date you planned it. And I'm having this dingling. Like, and he goes, I'll hold my hands up then. He goes, we didn't copy you, by the way. He goes, but
we've come up with the same thing.
We've just both come up with the same thing.
Yeah.
And all it was this other company, Borelli's or something, again, great name, like, they put on their branding Dough, D-O-U-G-H, Dough, D-O-U-G-H, Dodo. Yeah?
Right, okay.
So they took that as your copying goes with Dodo.
Yes,
yeah. And I can see where you get your wires crossed there. Yeah. And they were saying, well, we've done it for years, mate. Like, and I don't know where, and he was like, I think the one guy just said, like, I'm not having this, I'm going to my lawyers. Like, really, but it got dealt with, I guess. And you can see where that radical transparency, they didn't shy away from it. He was in the wrong, or at least he got sort of naturally blown out.
I think what you're touching on as well is what some of us have the ability to do on TripAdvisor and responding to reviews on Google and Facebook. When you've got a controversial or you've got a complaint, you can make something of it. And you can actually, it's an opportunity to show how you deal with that situation. Yeah. And actually, you know, it's not a bad thing to show transparent your costings. I've done it on mine, and I've just said, if you think that's expensive, then, you know, I'll break it down for you.
Yeah.
And I have done, and it's quite good to educate everybody reading that. You know,
to educate the people watching. Yeah,
I don't need to hide that conversation away or pretend that doesn't happen, or I'm not going to shy away from my prices. They are what they are. You can go on my website now and have a look. But the thing is, it's just for me a good opportunity to be transparent and say, all right, we got it wrong. Yeah. We did miss that off your order. It happens, and we will rectify it. Yeah. And that's, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think. One thing I wanted to touch on, and I'm going to start elaborating on this over the next few podcasts with people, is, and I want your guys' opinion because this is going to be the last topic and then we close off.
Don't do
it. Fish and chips can be too cheap and portions can be too big. But can the opposite be true? Can it be too expensive and can portions be too mean? And mean is a bit leading. Can the portions be a bit small?
I think it depends on expectation. And if you've got a custom base and you've always done it a certain way and you start to strip that back, people will notice. However, you can be quite a high-end fish and chip shop selling the same portion size, but your price is much higher. But your product is far superior, and it has better sustainability credentials, or the provenance of the food is completely different.
So ingredients are better. For me, it's the inconsistencies of different owners. Their perception of things are different. Like for us, our portion sizes are based upon one person. So if you've got a small appetite, you get a small chips. If you've got a regular chips, that's for a standard size portion. A large is for obviously someone with a larger appetite. Whereas somebody who's been to a different shop, they get a huge amount of chips and they're sharing it between 3 people, but that's their regular. And it's just, and that then becomes people's expectations of what a portion of chips should be.
One thing I've always said is that the NFFF should say, here's our guide sizes, not prices, just sizes. Baby fish 3 ounce, regular fish 6 ounce. Give it a name, and everyone can work towards it. Everyone can attribute their prices to it, but at least everyone's got a set defined terminology for what that fish is.
Yeah.
Because in some shops a regular is an 8 ounce, and in other shops a regular is a 6 ounce.
I mean, the NFFF do that, but like you say, everywhere is regional. I know up in the northeast, an average size fish is probably 8 or 9 ounces.
Yeah.
I was speaking to someone the other day down south, and their average is about 9 or 10 ounces for a regular fish. Was it? No, it was 10 or 11 ounces because that's what our large is.
Yeah.
And it's just everywhere is different, so your expectations are going to be different all over.
So here's a quick question off the top of my head: would you rather have a shop taking £5,000 a week that charges £15 fish and chips, or a shop taking £20,000 a week that charges £7 fish and chips?
A shop that takes £5,000 charging £15. There's a much bigger margin in.
I think you'd end up in the same place.
I think you're wrong, and I'll tell you why. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately. You will make a bigger gross margin, but your net margin would be terrible because of all that standing around waiting for customers to come in. Oil's
I could do it all myself, though.
you say that.
Jim's thinking he's only open Friday night, and he's got.
But what I'm getting at more than anything is that we're a volume business, the fish and chip industry, that is. And I think what I've been thinking about lately is we've just got to be careful not to run away from that history, because as I know there's a tendency, or we want more for our national dish. I get that too, but I think if we go too far away from the value for money, I think we could pee off a lot of customers. And then
you're just giving them alternative options, and some of those don't compare. You've got fish and chips on the menu, or you've got 150 different dishes.
Shall I go?
On a Thai menu or a Chinese menu. So you've got to be careful not to stray into those sort of territories. But I do think there's a balance to be struck over portion size and value.
Yeah, 100%.
You've got to demonstrate that you are getting good value for money, and I think
we always say value over price, don't we?
Yeah.
Well, value it's a different proposition. Anyone can be cheap, but can you be value?
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, and I'm a big believer of value for money. But I do think that if what you don't want as an industry is where the consumer says, "Should we get fish and chips tonight?" If they have to think about it, you've outpriced yourself. And now, if you've outpriced yourself, they're now comparing you to the Thai restaurant, which is a bit nicer, fragrant, to the Chinese restaurant, to the Indian restaurant. And I've never understood the analogy. Oh, well, it costs 15 quid for a pizza. It serves 4 people.
Yeah.
So I think we've got to be careful as an industry not to get too excited with the rhetoric of charging more. I understand the temptation. I'd love to sell the same batter I currently sell for £30 a bag. But you've got to be careful of that temptation, because I do believe that actually. Well, a friend of mine always says. So there's a friend of mine, Fred Capel. He always says it doesn't cost any more to serve another customer. If anything, it's even more profitable. You're
diluting your overhead.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, like my friend Benico, I think you met Benico.
Yeah.
Yeah. I forgot what he says now. He always says...
You can never understand a word he says.
You should. You're not far away. You're only half an hour away from Liverpool. But he says, you don't want to compete with all the other options. You want people to just say, we're going chippy tonight. Oh, on your way home, love, get chippy because I ran late. The minute it becomes a discussion between this and loads of other things, we start to get compared unfavourably because we're not exotic. We're not all of those things, or at least we're not perceived to be. So, I don't know. It's just something that I've been trying to scratch away at lately.
So yeah, I mean, I've had conversations with people in the past over the price of fish and chips, and they generally say, yeah, we should be charging more for our fish and chips, and I sort of will challenge them at that moment and just say, how efficient are you now at the current prices? Is the reason that you want more money for it really the right reason?
Yeah.
Is it because you're not making enough? And if you're not making enough, are you challenging your overheads?
Yeah.
Are you efficient enough already? If you are and you're still not making the right amount, then you need to be looking at calculating your margins and doing other things.
I mean, we've done it before with like portions of scampi, for instance. Rather than putting the price up, we took a piece of scampi out of the portion, and it just simplified it so that the customer isn't paying more, but they're still getting a decent sized portion for it. So
look at again, to bring them up. It's essentially the McDonald's podcast.
The Big Mac isn't a Big Mac.
The Big Mac is just a Mac.
Yes.
You know, and not only that, what has been really good about it from their point of view is they've reduced their calorie intake. So now they look like heroes. Oh, our food's healthier. It's not healthier. It is obviously if you're eating just that amount, but I guess with the drop in their calorie intake, people just buy 6 nuggets to go with their burger now.
Yeah.
And so you can see where if you've got the right portion size, people end up buying more food anyway.
Yeah.
So it drives sales. You know,
well, that's what we found with the light bite meal, haven't we? People are now moving away from buying a regular fish and chips.
Light bite.
No, they're getting a light bite meal, but they're also buying, say, a portion of halloumi to go with it, or a cheese and spring onion potato cake. More homemade produce as well, so that therefore there's a bigger margin on them sort of things as well. And to be honest, the light bite meal is probably a little bit more profitable than a regular fish and chips anyway.
Well, especially when they bought something they weren't going to buy.
Yeah.
It's a no-brainer.
But they're spending the same amount of money as well because and getting more for it, really. So.
Yeah. Well, look, guys, on that note, we've covered quite a lot of time. And I know we could talk for another hour, but we're already like nearly 2 hours in. And I think, is there anything we've missed?
There's probably
I'm sure we can come back another day, can't we?
Yeah, same again next year.
Same again next year.
Yeah.
It is our anniversary, you know.
Yeah. It's cute, isn't it?
You know, everyone keeps calling us twins.
Really?
Yeah.
You've got more hair than me.
My balding head, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm the better looking one, aren't I? Yeah.
I'm not that far.
He's my Turkish brother. Well, guys, thanks for your time today, and we'll get this wrapped up. It's over just under 2 hours.
It's a long one.
So it's a long one, and we don't want people to start falling asleep, as captivating as all three of us are. Yeah. So anyway, guys, thank you for your time today.
Cheers, Stel.
Thanks, Stelios.